The cold was unbearable. The wind cut through their thin, ragged clothes like knives. The alien girl, whose name was Lyra, shivered beside the two young children she had taken responsibility for. The snowflakes fell in a steady stream, covering everything in a thick white blanket. They had no place to go, no home to return to. The war had left everything in ruins. Their planet, once a beautiful and peaceful place, was now a battlefield. Lyra had heard the humans speak of the Great War, but she never understood what it truly meant until it was too late. The war wasn't just about soldiers fighting. In the fields, it was a war against survival itself. And now, as the snow began to fall heavier, Lyra and the children were left with nothing. Where will we go now? The youngest of the two children asked, her voice trembling with fear. Lyra didn't have an answer. She looked around at the empty streets, the abandoned houses, and the distant mountains. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. She had done everything she could to protect the children, but even she didn't know how much longer they could survive in this harsh cold. Suddenly, a faint voice broke through the howling wind. It was a human. "Are you lost?" the voice asked, calm but firm. Lyra looked up, her eyes wide in surprise. She had heard stories of humans, but she never thought one would find her in this forsaken place. The human stepped closer, a tall figure, wrapped in a thick coat, his face partially covered by a scarf. "Come with me," the human said, his voice filled with kindness. "You're not alone anymore." Lyra hesitated. She had always been taught to stay away from humans. They were dangerous, unpredictable. But in that moment, the cold, the fear, and the uncertainty melted away. For the first time in a long while, Lyra felt a spark of hope. "Why should we trust you?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. The human smiled softly. "Because I'm here to help. And because I know what it's like to have nothing." With no other choice, Lyra nodded, silently motioning for the children to follow her. As they walked towards the human, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a chance encounter. Something bigger was at play. And as the human led them through the snowy streets, Lyra knew one thing for sure. Their lives were about to change forever. The snowstorm raged around them, but the human moved with purpose, guiding them through the empty streets. Lyra glanced at the two children, their faces pale from the cold, and felt a surge of protectiveness. She had always been their shield, but now in the hands of a stranger, she didn't know what to expect. "Where are we going?" Lyra asked, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "We're heading to a shelter," the human replied. "A place where people like you can be safe." The shelter. The word felt foreign to Lyra. She had heard rumors of such places during the war, but she had never believed they existed. In her mind, safety was a luxury only the rich and powerful could afford. For people like her, the only option was to survive on their own. But now, with the children in tow and the freezing cold closing in, the promise of safety was more than just a fleeting thought. It felt like a lifeline. They walked for what seemed like hours, the wind biting at their skin and the cold seeping into their bones. Lyra's legs grew heavy, but she didn't stop. She couldn't, not with the children depending on her. The human glanced back at her, his face now fully visible, and Lyra caught sight of his deep brown eyes. They weren't like the cold, indifferent eyes of the soldiers she had encountered during the war. His eyes were warm, filled with understanding, and something else, something she couldn't quite place. "How did you survive the war?" Lyra asked suddenly, her curiosity getting the better of her. The human's expression darkened for a brief moment, but he quickly masked it with a smile. "I wasn't always in the war," he said softly. "I had a family once, before everything changed." But that was a long time ago. Lyra didn't press him further. She could see the pain in his eyes, a pain she recognized all too well. It was the same pain she carried in her heart, a reminder of everything she had lost. As they rounded a corner, Lyra saw it. a large building with glowing lights in the windows. It wasn't much, but to her, it felt like a sanctuary. "That's the shelter," the human said, nodding towards the building. "Inside, you'll be safe, warm, and there will be food." Lyra could hardly believe it. She had never been so close to something that promised comfort. She had always learned to be wary of kindness, to question every offer of help. But something about this human, something in his voice, made her believe that maybe, just maybe, this was different. They reached the door, and the human knocked twice. The door swung open almost immediately, revealing a woman with short, dark hair and a kind face. "Welcome," the woman said, her voice gentle. "Come in, you're safe now." Lyra hesitated, looking at the children. The little girl's eyes were wide with wonder, while the boy seemed more cautious, still unsure about the stranger who had led them here. But in that moment, Lyra made a decision. She had to trust. Not just the human, but this place, this opportunity. For safety, for the children, for herself. With a deep breath, she stepped inside, feeling the warmth of the shelter envelop her. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lyra allowed herself to relax. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like there was a chance. A real chance. And she couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something much bigger than a simple rescue. The warmth inside the shelter was a stark contrast to the biting cold they had left behind. Lyra felt the tension in her body ease as the heat wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. The children huddled close to her, their faces softening. With relief, the woman who had opened the door led them down a narrow hallway, her footsteps echoing in the quiet building. The walls were lined with small rooms, each one holding people who had once been like Lyra and the children, lost, abandoned, and searching for a place to belong. Lyra's eyes scanned the shelter as they walked. The walls were simple, painted in soft neutral colors, but there was something about the place that felt homey. There were people talking quietly in the corners, some sitting with their heads down, while others spoke softly to one another. There was a sense of quiet calm, but also an undercurrent of fear. Fear of what had happened to the world outside. Fear of what the future held. They reached a small room at the end of the hall, where a single bed was pushed against the wall. A thin blanket lay folded at the foot of the bed, and a chair sat beside it. The woman smiled warmly at them. "This will be your room for tonight," she said. "You can rest here and eat something. We'll bring you food in a bit." Lyra nodded, grateful but still uncertain. She helped the children settle on the bed, making sure they were comfortable before turning to the woman. "Thank you for helping us," Lyra said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "But why are you doing this? Why are you helping us?" The woman hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's not just about helping one or two people. It's about rebuilding. We all have lost something, Lyra. But if we work together, we can create something better. This shelter ... It's a part of that. A place where people like you can find hope again." Lyra looked down at the floor, her mind racing. She had always been taught to distrust kindness, to avoid any situation. That seemed too good to be true. But the woman's words resonated with her in a way she hadn't expected. Rebuilding. Hope. These were things she had almost forgotten existed. Before Lyra could respond, the woman turned to leave, but then paused. "There's one more thing," she said quietly. "We need to talk about your past." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The woman looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and caution. "We know you're not just a refugee from the war. We've seen the markings on your skin. You're one of the ones they call special." Lyra felt a cold chill sweep over her. The markings. Her blue skin. The war. She had always known there was something different about her, but she had never been able to explain it. No one had ever asked about it before. And now the human woman's words had triggered something deep inside her, Something Lyra had kept. Hidden for years. What do you know about me? Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. The woman met her gaze. We know enough to understand that you're not just a survivor. You're someone who might be key to something much bigger. Something that could change the course of this war. Lyra felt a lump form in her throat. She had been running from her past, from the things she didn't understand. But now it seemed like her past had caught up with her. The woman left the room quietly, closing the door behind her. Lyra sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything. The war, the shelter, the human who had helped them. And now this talk of something bigger. Something important. For the first time since the war had begun, Lyra felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was part of something. But what that something was, she wasn't sure yet. And as the wind howled outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change once again. In ways she couldn't even begin to imagine. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door the woman had just closed behind her. The words echoed in her mind. You're special. What did that even mean? For the longest time, Lyra had thought she was just another refugee, just another survivor of a war that had stolen everything from her. But the woman's words had changed that. Now she was someone with markings, someone who might be key to something bigger. The children were asleep beside her, their faces peaceful for the first time in days. Lyra's mind, however, raced. Her whole life had been shaped by fear. Fear of the war. Fear of what had happened to her planet. But now there was a new kind of fear. A fear of the unknown. What was she really a part of? What made her different from anyone else, and what would it mean for the future? Before she could lose herself in the questions, there was a knock on the door. She stood up quickly, brushing the thoughts aside. The door opened, and the same woman from earlier stepped inside, holding a tray of food. I thought you might be hungry, the woman said, her voice kind and gentle. Lyra nodded, but her mind was still elsewhere. She took the tray from the woman, but her eyes were fixed on the woman's face, searching for answers. You said I was special, Lyra began hesitantly. What does that mean? Why did you say that? The woman placed the tray down on the small table and sat down across from her. Her expression softened, but there was still a seriousness in her eyes. I didn't want to tell you this too soon, she said, but I think you need to know. You've been marked, Lyra, not just by the war, but by something deeper, something older, your kind. The ones with the blue skin, the markings, they're not just survivors of the war. They are something else. Lyra felt her heart race. Something else? What are you talking about? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman leaned forward, her eyes focused on Lyra's. Your markings, they signify power. They're the sign of an ancient race, an alien race, that once ruled these lands. Your people have been scattered, lost to time. But there's something else, something that was left behind, a legacy. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. She had always known she was different, but she had never considered that she might be part of something larger than herself. She looked down at her hands, the blue skin shimmering in the soft light. The woman continued. There's a hidden power within you, Lyra. A power that could change the tide of the war. It's not something that can be controlled easily, but it's there. And it's why the humans have been hunting you. Why they've been trying to track down people like you. Lyra felt her chest tighten. The humans ... Are they the ones who destroyed everything? Who took everything from us? The woman nodded slowly. Yes, they wanted to control your people's power. And they'll stop at nothing to find it. Lyra's mind was spinning. Her past, her people, the war, it was all connected in a way she couldn't understand. But one thing was clear, she couldn't run from this anymore. The woman had opened her eyes to the truth, and now Lyra had to face it. Her people's power, the humans, the war. It was all tangled together, and Lyra knew she had a choice to make. She glanced at the children sleeping peacefully on the bed. They were depending on her. "I don't know if I can do this," Lyra whispered, more to herself than to the woman. The woman gave her a reassuring smile. "You don't have to do it alone. You have people who will help you, and together you can find the strength to fight back, to change everything." Lyra nodded, though she still felt a sense of uncertainty. She didn't know what the future held, but she couldn't ignore the pull inside her. There was a power deep within her, waiting to be unleashed. And maybe, just maybe, it could be the key to ending the war. For the first time, Lyra felt like she had a purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting. And this time, she wouldn't be alone. The days at the shelter passed in a blur. The warmth and safety of the place had given Lyra and the children a sense of peace. But the truth she had learned weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't ignore it. The power that had been dormant inside her for so long was now a constant presence, a reminder of everything that had happened and everything that could still happen. The woman whose name Lyra had learned was Mara had been teaching her about her people, about the lost legacy they had carried, and about the humans who were hunting them. But despite Mara's reassurances, Lyra still felt uncertain. She wasn't sure she was ready to embrace the power that could change everything. What if it was too much? What if it led to more destruction? She had already lost so much. Could she really risk everything again? One morning, as she sat in the small room with the children, the door opened. It was Mara, and she had brought a man with her, someone Lyra had never seen before. He was tall, his features hard, but his eyes were sharp with purpose. "This is Captain Eric," Mara introduced him, her voice steady. "He's part of the resistance. He's here to help us help you." Lyra stood up, her instincts on high alert. She had heard of the resistance, the people who fought back against the human invaders. But she wasn't sure if she trusted them. "What do you want with me?" Lyra asked, her voice firm. She wasn't afraid, but the situation was growing more complicated by the day. Eric studied her for a moment before speaking. "We've been following the human movements. They've been getting closer, but we've also learned something important. We know about the power inside you, Lyra. We know it's the key to defeating them." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. The key to defeating them. She glanced at the children, who were now awake and looking up at her with wide, uncertain eyes. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said, her voice softer now. "I don't want to be a weapon." Eric nodded, understanding. In his gaze, "You're not a weapon, Lyra, but the power you hold can change the balance. You don't have to fight alone. The resistance has been looking for someone like you, someone who can help us strike back." Mara stepped forward. "The humans have been using your people's power against you for years. It's time to take that power back. The war won't end unless we fight. And you're not the only one who has the strength to change things, but you are the one who can lead us." Lyra swallowed hard. The weight of their words hung in the air, pressing down on her. She had never thought of herself as a leader. She had always been a survivor. But now she couldn't ignore the truth. She was different. She had the power. And it wasn't just for survival anymore. It was for something much bigger. "What do I need to do?" she asked quietly, her voice steady. Despite the storm of emotions inside her, Eric smiled. "We'll help you control it. We'll train you. But first, we need to get to the human stronghold. It's the only way to strike at the heart of their operation. If we succeed, we can end this war for good." Lyra nodded, a surge of determination filling her. She wasn't sure what awaited her, but she knew one thing. She couldn't stay hidden forever. The war had already taken so much. She wouldn't let it take any more. "Let's do it," Lyra said, her voice unwavering. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Lyra felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. The journey was far from over, and there would be challenges ahead. But she was ready. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a fighter. And this time, she had a chance to win. The resistance had gathered. Lyra stood at the forefront, her heart pounding in her chest as she looked out over the battlefield. The air was thick with tension. In the distance, the human stronghold loomed. A dark and imposing structure that seemed to pierce the sky. It was the heart of their operation, the place where the power that had torn her world apart was being used against her people. But now, it was time to turn the tables. Lyra's hands trembled, but she clenched them into fists. The power that had once terrified her was now a part of her, flowing through her veins like fire. She could feel it, a presence inside her, urging her forward, telling her to take control. She had spent days training with Eric and the other resistance members, learning how to harness the energy that had been hidden within her for so long. But no amount of training could have prepared her for this moment. This was it. The final battle. The human army was ready, their machines of war lined up on the battlefield. They had no idea what was coming. They thought they could control her. People, that they could use their power for their own gain. But they hadn't counted on Lyra. Are you ready? Mara's voice broke through her thoughts. The older woman stood beside her, her eyes filled with quiet strength. Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the stronghold. Let's finish this. With a deep breath, she raised her hands. The energy inside her surged, and the world around her seemed to bend and twist. Her markings, those ancient symbols that had defined her existence, glowed brighter than ever, and the power of her people pulsed in the air. It wasn't just her strength. It was the strength of her entire race, the strength of everyone who had suffered, lost, and fought to survive. The human forces advanced, their weapons aimed at the resistance. But before they could fire a single shot, Lyra stepped forward, her power erupting in a brilliant flash of light. The earth trembled beneath her feet as the energy shot forward, crashing into the human lines. The force was so powerful that it sent shockwaves through the air, knocking the enemy soldiers off their feet. For a moment, there was silence. And then, chaos erupted. The resistance charged, their weapons drawn, but it wasn't just the soldiers who were fighting now. Lyra could feel the power inside her, guiding her, leading her to the stronghold. She moved with a speed and strength that she had never known before, her hands crackling with energy as she sent blast after blast toward the human forces. The air was thick with tension and the sounds of battle, but through it all, Lyra was focused. She was no longer afraid of what she could do. She had embraced it. She was ready. The resistance fought alongside her, pushing the humans back, inch by inch. But it was clear now, the humans were losing. Lyra's power was overwhelming, and the resistance's determination was unwavering. Finally, they reached the stronghold. The gates, once impenetrable, now stood wide open before them. The human forces had been routed, their last line of defense shattered by the sheer force of Lyra's power. The battle was over. The war was over. Lyra stood at the entrance of the stronghold, breathing heavily, her body sore from the battle. But there was no time to rest. She turned to Eric, who had fought beside her every step of the way. "It's done," she said, her voice strong but filled with relief. Eric nodded, his expression one of quiet pride. "You did it, Lyra. We all did." As the dust settled, Lyra looked around at the faces of the resistance fighters. They had won. The war was over, and the humans' hold on her people had been broken. For the first time in years, Lyra felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape now. The power she had once feared was no longer a curse, it was a gift. And with it, she would rebuild. Lyra turned back to the children who had stayed safely behind the front lines. They were looking at her with wide eyes, their expressions filled with awe. She smiled softly, kneeling down to their level. "It's over now. You're safe." And as the sun began to set over the battlefield, casting a golden light across the land, Lyra knew that this was only the beginning. She had found her place in the world, and now she would help lead it into a new era, an era of peace, of hope. 4. The first time in a long while, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a leader. And with that, she knew that anything was possible.